So we had this patient recently, and the dude definitely got to me. Like, you know when someone gets to you, when you feel like the way I felt about him was just, I felt so enraged. I mean, I was keeping it cool. I don't think anyone could tell I felt this way, but my blood was definitely boiling. And I just wanted to, like, honestly, I wanted to fight this guy. Is that bad? I think it's bad if you want to fight a patient. But he was driving me insane. Driving me mad. Like, I just wanted to tackle him and just hold him down and be like, knock that shit off. This dude, let me tell you about this guy. Mike. We got Mike in, and I feel like probably what's happening is he's withdrawing, but I can't be for certain. And we had him on a previous admission. I hadn't worked with him then. This was a few years back, I guess, but he apparently was behaving the same way. And so who knows? It could be behavioral, or it could be the fact that he's not getting fentanyl and he's going through withdrawals, and maybe he's having just some issues and this anger is resurfacing and he feels like he needs more fentanyl but isn't getting it. He was on Suboxone, but it was a low dose. I don't know. I really have no idea. All I know is that when we admitted this guy, he was pacing around the unit, right? And he's got his fist clenched and he's growling. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. We can handle that. Like, not a big issue. He's not hurting anyone. He is being disruptive, but it's not the end of the world. It's a psychiatric unit. People are going to be disruptive. You have to expect that. So I told the provider about this. I think one time he kind of like headbutted the wall. Maybe his head was this hard. It was a pretty hard headbutt, but it wasn't like he was self-harming. He was just releasing anger. I mean, I guess you could say anytime you punch a wall, maybe you are self-harming, but the intent was not to self-harm. The intent was, I think, to release some of his frustration. So anyhow, I let the provider know. We get him some Zydus on board, these orally disintegrating tablets that work relatively quickly. It's an antipsychotic. It's very good at reducing this kind of behavior. So he takes it, thankfully, because we don't do involuntary meds at this point. If he didn't take it, I don't know what we would have done, but eventually the Zydus kicks in. He sleeps for a long time. Then he kind of has the same issue the next day, wakes up at about like 3-4 in the morning, I think, and is real frustrated. So they give him 10 milligrams of Zydus. He calms down. I remember going into work, I'm thinking, okay, well, the Zydus lasts about this amount of time, so we probably got about another 12 hours until he loses his shit again. I wasn't that close. I think it was like 2 hours off before he woke up and started losing his shit. And he had come out of his room earlier in the day, and he would do things like he'd come out, he'd look at the food that we had made for him, wouldn't say anything, would go right back to his room and slam the door. And he's slamming it so hard that the paint from the wall and the drywall's coming off, right? Like, he's slamming the door pretty loud. So throughout the day, he was just kind of doing that. Like, he'd come out for a little bit, just clench his fists, look real mad, kind of grunt a little, and then he'd go back to his room. So then one time he says something along the lines of, like, why the hell am I in here? He's on an M1 hold, right? So he's being legally held here for up to 72 hours at our institution. It was put on by a hospital. They transferred him to us. And the funny thing is, when I did the nurse to nurse, oh yeah, his behavior was fine and all that. And then we get him, like, this guy is clearly a behavioral problem. And I have found that to be true a number of times. I'll talk to a hospital and they say that his behavior is completely fine. And then they come here and I'm like, was he not demonstrating? I doubt he was just like all of a sudden, like I doubt he was calm there and then all of a sudden he starts demonstrating this kind of concerning behavior now. Come on, local hospital, please just tell us the truth when we transfer patients. So anyhow, on his worst outburst, he comes out and he's like, why the fuck am I in here? Why the fuck am I? My girlfriend's out there. She's fucking all the dudes she wants and I'm stuck in here. And he's pissed. And I think he initially came into the hospital for suicidality, which is curious because I'm like, this dude's not suicidal at all. If anything, he's like homicidal. And so he starts just like punching walls, right? Like hitting them. Then he walks around, grunts a lot, then hitting the wall again. And then I think at one time he took one of the, like a little wall sanitizers. I mean, he smashed the shit out of that. His big ass batteries came on the floor. So I run out, I grab the batteries, put them back in the nurse's station. And he's just kind of pacing the unit real pissed. And you try to de-escalate and it's like nothing that we could say would help him whatsoever. And I really feel like his behavior was more behavioral and attention seeking than it was anything else. Because the reality is he could have broke a ton of stuff. I mean, he could have broke our computers. We have this big screen TV up there. He could have broken that. Instead, he was throwing chairs around, lifting up. Our chairs are wooden. They're not, and we don't really have our unit is not made for this kind of behavior. I mean, there's just so many things that you could use as a potential weapon that our unit is just not made for this kind of behavior. But the reason that I say that I think it was behavioral is because he could have broken a lot of things that he didn't. And so I really feel like he was just seeking attention, which is fine, but it's like, we'll give you all the attention you need, but at the same time, that didn't seem to help. He just kept doing it. So long story short on this guy, we end up calling the cops. The cops arrive, they apprehend him, and then they take take him to a higher level of care. I think the biggest mistake we made as a team, and I'm just, because I've been, what happens when you work in psych nursing and you have these very intense situations, you'll look back on it because so much happens that you forget about certain things. And I'm looking back on this, I'm like, man, the biggest mistake we made, and I have to ultimately I have to take responsibility because I was charge nurse and I made a huge mistake here. So at one point, we had some staff that were sitting behind the nurses station, and we had 2 female staff that were working with us that I think were particularly scared of this guy. We had me, another male, and then we had security there. And this guy was, I guess I should give a physical description of him. He was about my size. He probably weighed 160 pounds, was kind of a strong dude. I feel like he and I probably have relatively the same strength when it comes to our own body weight. He was able to pull open some of our security doors, these magnetic security doors, just by really yanking it pretty hard. I'm not like super strong. I can do probably like 6 or 7 pull-ups, maybe like 40 push-ups. I mean, for my body weight, I think I'm in okay shape for my age. But the reality is we could have handled him physically if we needed to. I didn't want to, because you never know what's going to happen. Someone might get hit, you might get hurt, he might get hurt, whatever. And then your incident report, instead of being maybe a page long, now it's like a whole freaking dissertation, right? So here's the biggest mistake we made as a team, and I have to take responsibility of it because I should have been like, okay, why are we doing this? We need to do X, Y, and Z. At one point, 2 of us were back in the nurses station. I was kind of standing in the door frame, just observing this guy just standing there. And sometimes he was walking around, he's grunting and all that. I gave him some nicotine gum, and when he goes to throw the wrapper away, he steps at me like he's gonna punch me, kind of like this with his shoulder. So I just step back like this, right? But I'm not like gonna cower, because I don't ever want to show fear, because if you show fear, then they notice it. And here's my point. So at one point, more people would kind of come into the nurses station because they were scared. So the female staff member then shuts the door. She's like, here, let's just shut the door. And she locks us all in, right? So we're locked in, and he's out there. And I'm like, okay, this is great, I guess, as far as keeping our safety goes, because he can't get back here. But then in retrospect, what I should have done is like, you know what? If you feel unsafe, you're more than welcome to stay back here. I'm going to go out there and just maintain a presence. And that's what we should have done, because as soon as, what do you think happened? Here's my question for you watching this video. What do you think happened when all of us went inside the nurses station and we locked ourselves back there? Just think, like, be in that patient's frame of mind for a second and think, what do you think that appears in his head? Like, how do you think he perceives it? Because I guarantee you, he saw it as a sign of weakness, and now he's thinking, okay, I can do whatever I want. And we're lucky that he really didn't do whatever he wanted, because it could have just been a disaster. He could have gone behind our nurses station, smashed a bunch of computer screens, and he did come behind our nurses station. And I just thought, oh man, he's gonna start trashing our shit. And at that point, I didn't feel comfortable coming out, because as soon as I would have came out, he would have been right there. Like, there was no space. It would have been hard to maintain that safe space with him right there. And so that was a big, like, in retrospect, if I could go back, I would have allowed people who felt unsafe to stay locked in the nurses station. And then whoever else wanted to come with me, I would have stayed in the day hall and just maintained space between myself and him and tried to keep verbally de-escalating. So yeah, the police did come eventually pick him up. They took him to a higher level of care. And it was just, these are the kind of, like, I don't know. And I feel like in this example as a nurse, there's got to be something here for me to learn beyond what I could have done in that situation. I feel like there's something in like, whenever you get as pissed as I was, like, I almost, like, I had this, I was like, I almost felt like I wish he could have gotten me so that I could have defended myself, right? Like, that's how badly I wanted to just. So I feel like there's probably, whenever you feel that way, there's probably some sort of internal work I should be doing. I'm not entirely sure what it is at this point. So that was Mike. That's what it's like to work in psych. Yeah, sometimes psych can be just super dangerous. And our unit, man. Like, when I worked at the state hospital, I could run laps. If someone came at me, there was enough space to where I could just run in this giant day hall, and I would just maintain a presence. But like in this hospital, sweet mother of God, we have just the most awkward layout. It's so awkward.